Hello to the panel and to the audience as well. So we're fast approaching, I think, lunchtime, so we'll kind of keep it to the point and try to kind of give very concise information in terms of how structurally, I mean, specifically with respect to this panel and discussion and all that, right? So before all of that, we'll probably can start off with a brief intro about of each of you. So Sandilya, we'll start with you.
Yeah, hello everyone, if I'm audible. My name is 𝗕𝗲𝗃𝗧𝗏. I lead product for 𝗘𝗲𝗚𝗚𝗏. I've been with 𝗘𝗲𝗚𝗏 for the last 10 months now.
Hello everyone, I'm Pradeep. I lead product at Swiggy. I've been here for 1.5 years. Prior to that, I worked at 𝗕𝗲𝗃𝗃 and a few more startups.
Hi, myself Jitesh. I had product for a startup called 𝗘𝗲𝗃𝗃𝗧𝗏. And prior to this, mostly in the startup domain, worked with Amazon, worked with 𝗕𝗲𝗏𝗴𝗃, worked with Snapdeal. Yeah, so dialed into product management. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so our discussion is about aligning product vision with business goals, but we'll kind of slightly also stretch it out to vision and strategy with respect to business goals and business strategy as well, right? So, and in the current fast-paced environment, business environment, where things are actually changing so fast, right, in terms of being proactive and reactive. So I believe, so the whole idea is that essentially there has to be a cohesive alignment or integration between product vision or strategies or with business goals and strategies as well, right? And this probably also brings in challenges. Hopefully we discuss about that and hopefully also about that as well in terms of probably org alignment and two, right? So, so that is going to be the crux of the discussion, and then we actually have a very elite panel and spanning across multiple companies as well, right? So from 𝗘𝗲𝗚 and probably earlier Dell as well to Flipkart, and then 𝗕𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗹𝗶 in the travel and hospital space, and 𝗕𝗲𝗴𝗶𝗹𝗶 and 𝗕𝗏𝗏, and then we have with Swiggy and then with 𝗕𝗲, right? So fintechs as well in terms of Unicard and all, right? So I think we'll be able to kind of really deliver value to the audience. Okay, so so let's dive in then. Probably what we'll do is that to kind of really justify as to whether, so we'll probably start off with something about as to why, right? The whys of basically about this whole discussion point about product vision or strategy and business goals, right? Why is there need of an alignment, right? Probably Pradeep, you can take a stab at it. We'll start with that. Is there a real need for alignment? And then if there is, then why is it so?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Of course, there's a need. I mean, at the end of the day, you're building product for something, right? I think business vision gives you the...
Is your mic on?
Can you guys hear me? Is it better? Yeah. All right. So yeah, I mean, let me start again. So yeah, of course, alignment is needed. And you're building product for something at the end of the day, right? Business gives you that direction. These two things can't go in different directions, right? For an example, at Swiggy, you want to provide convenience to a lot of users in their homes, right? I have to build products in that area. So when it comes to vision, whether it's business or product, they give you the direction where you want to go as business. Product is a tool in a way to achieve those business goals that have been set up. So I mean, it's not about alignment. They have to work together. There is no doubt about that. The only challenges are when vision goes into strategies, sometimes businesses may become tactical basis, let's say, if there is a compliance-related regulation that suddenly comes up, right? I'm sure you share your experiences, right? At that point, you may have to act immediately. And at that point, how do you change your product strategy to achieve those tactical goals, right? That's where it becomes a very difficult art to perform.
Sandilya, so if you could touch upon from your experience and from your point of view in terms of how does this contribute? How would this alignment in that sense contribute? Ideally, basically, everything is actually supposed to be for the better of the business, right? So how do you, in your point of view, how does it actually contribute to the better of the business? This alignment between product and business goals or strategies and so.
Yeah, so I'll actually probably try and take an example that probably Yulu went through, right? But again, before getting into that, I'll just spend a couple of minutes on these three terms, right? So that we as a panel and the audience are also on the same page, right? And if anybody agrees, disagrees, please feel free to do so, right? So let's talk about these three terms, right? Product vision, product strategy, and business goals, right? So the first thing is product vision, right? Product vision is something that is actually explains the purpose of your product, right? So basically, you're trying to get to a why and what, right? Actually focuses on the why and what, right? For example, I'll take a few examples of known companies and the kind of opportunities that product vision enables you to diversify into, right? For example, let's look at Tesla, right? Tesla is trying to accelerate the entire world into a sustainable future, right? So that makes them open for actually looking beyond cars, for which a lot of us know them for, right? So it gives them space to actually get into let's say the entire home pod, etc., right? So basically that is product vision, right? So you try to actually create a purpose for what you're trying to solve, right? Then there is product strategy, right? A lot of companies wish to aspire for a longer product strategy, but a lot of my friends will agree that product strategy will be limited to a certain course in time, right? Like let's say a 6-month or a 9-month kind of a horizon, right? So there you're trying to establish or ensure that you're able to hit the goals that you want for your business, right? And that's where business goals come from, right? Which is that as a business, what's your aspiration for the year to meet the critical shareholders' aspirations and the responsibilities that you have as for a board, right? How do you align and deliver to those goals, right? So these are the three terms that we'll broadly be using in this discussion. So I thought I will talk about that, right? So from a product vision, product strategy, I'll take the example again of Yulu, right? So Yulu is into mobility as a service solution provider, right? We have these beautiful blue bikes and gray bikes that are used by a lot of people, right? So during the pandemic, right, what happened? So a little before the pandemic as well, right? Around the late 2018, early 2019 is when we brought in hordes of these cute blue bikes that you see on the ground, right? We started putting them at places where
that's a nice term, cute,
right? People like us could leverage, right? So what happened then is that a lot of craze. It took to storm, right? A lot of people used to put it on Twitter, and there was a rave about it, and we were slowly deploying more bikes, right? Come to 2020 March, what happened is the entire lockdown got announced and we hit a halt, right? Revenues came to zero, right? So at that time, the product strategy, the product vision, and the business goals were probably something else, right? Which is that how do you solve for mobility problems of a common customer, right? Now, what happened during that time is a lot of these people, like the security guards, the office staff, right? All of these people were getting out of their jobs because of the pressure that the pandemic put and the lockdowns put in, right? So then and at the same time, the food commerce industry, the e-commerce industry were growing like crazy, right? So that's when people started leveraging our bikes because there's no need for a license and nothing, right? So then suddenly what happens is that now the business goal is now to make sure that we are sustainable and we are able to earn revenues and so on, and we had to immediately make a pivot. And that's the pivot that you see, right? Today you'll see a lot of delivery guys with their bags using the Yulu bikes like crazy, right? So the point that I'm probably trying to make here is that business goals and business and product strategy are extremely hardcore tied to each other, and without which you will not succeed as a business or even for a product manager's fantasy of taking products to life.
Great point that you make, and then probably just continuing on from that, Jitesh, if you could, yeah. So the point that Sandilia and also we actually heard was about a lot about reactive and proactive approaches. Right? Reactive in terms of how the market actually or the business actually needs at that specific moment, and then proactive in terms of actually probably looking futuristic and thinking as to what should be the business goal in that sense, right? And also probably at different stages of your organizations as well. So probably a 0 to 1 will actually probably require a different strategy, and then maybe a 1 to X would actually require a different strategy, right? And from your point of view, what do you think are the key elements in terms of defining a strategy which kind of aligns to this reactive or proactive scheme of things, or a organizational status, whether it is 0 to 1 or 1 to X?
Yeah. So when it comes to vision and things like that, so I categorize them into 2 parts. One is your long-term vision, and then you take steps to achieve those long-term vision, which you can call it a short-term vision. Your long-term vision, if it changes, you're pivoting, right? So ideally, long-term vision should remain the same. Your short-term vision, are steps to achieve that long-term vision, right? When company is in 0 to 1 phase, right? So fortunately, I've been part of a company like 𝗕𝗚𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗟, where we have built 0 to 1, Snapdeal, which was in 1 to 10, and Amazon, which will be in 10 to 100 for the next so many years. So when it is 0 to 1, what happens is the team is small, you communicate well, and it's much easier to align and bring together. Even if it's reactive, you can adopt very fast, because the chaos is less. There's a small team. You come together. You just scribble on the board. You have a solution. You go ahead, execute. So execution is much faster. When the company is in 1 to 10 phase, then the team is growing, right? So this alignment, I think, complex things in life are often very simple. Like communication. Communication plays a very key role in terms of aligning people to drive them towards a certain goal, even if it's chaos, right? And when I say communication, it's not just one-time communication. You need to keep repeating, so that, how do you assess that everyone is sort of speaking the same thing, which maybe the founder or whatever the company is thinking towards, right? So I'll give you an example. At Snapdeal, what we used to do is every quarter we used to take a goal. Like, for example, this quarter we need to move our NPS from 20 to 35. And now, as a result, and to communicate, there were placards put everywhere. This is the goal for the quarter. And as a result of which, what used to happen is every team, there are multiple teams in Snapdeal. Now, every team needs to have something in their roadmap which will align to that particular thing, right? So it's an amazing form of communication, and to align a big team. Now, for companies like Amazon, you need to plan really, much ahead in advance. If you don't plan well, because there are multiple moving parts, like all the parts need to come together to sort of deliver something. And as the company grows big, planning plays, more and more, planning becomes more and more important. And, to answer your question, if things changes, it causes a lot of chaos, because ultimately everything, is running in a supply chain, right? And if one thing is sort of, not working in the same direction, it will cause chaos, right? For example, 𝗕𝗚𝗏𝗧𝗔𝗟 is a fintech startup, right? And if we have to build a company which exists for the next 50 years, 100 years, you just need to adhere to the guidelines. And RBI, comes up with new directions every day. So we were going pretty strong, and suddenly, RBI came up and said that what you're doing, you need to stop. Then what do? You sort of, your vision still remains the same, right? To provide credit to Indians at affordable cost, right? So your vision still remains the same. But how do you come together, put together a team which sort of solves for it faster? How do you, take a step back and, because there's chaos, right? How do you solve for, giving comfort to your team that, things will be in order? So these things play a very critical role. But it takes time, but ultimately you're back on track. And the same chaos is much difficult for a company like Amazon. Because to manage that chaos, for example, RBI came up with this PA/PG guideline. I don't know how many of you are aware about it, or data localization, right? That all your, so Amazon, it was spread all across. Now to even execute something like that, they will take, I think we took 1.5 years, right? For data localization to happen versus a company like Unicards can do it like maybe in a week. Right? So that's how, I'll put it across for companies as 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100.
Jitesh, if you could just hold on a bit, so we'll just continue on that same thought process. So I typically love that you actually brought up that example of Snapdeal, right? When basically you would actually put a placard so that the whole so I'm a big fan of the OKR model, which Google actually pioneered, and I think a lot of other companies have actually kind of also embraced to a level to kind of create a synchronization between different teams working towards a common objective and so on. However, of course, there would be challenges, organizational challenges, in terms of basically ensuring this adoption and alignment, right? Have you seen, and this is my view that there will be, but have you seen any such challenges, and essentially what specific are those challenges that you have seen in your experience across these multiple companies that you have been part of?
Right, so challenges are there. So first and foremost, so company comes up with a vision, right? Say you're a part of a team and founders come up with something. So first thing is, whether everyone feels that is the right thing to do. That is the first thing which you need to solve for. Where, so that when all the, parts are moving together, the kind of momentum and impact you can deliver, you just cannot think of, right? So first and foremost, what you need to solve for is whether what you are saying, everyone feels that is the right thing to do. And that's why, you would see that most of the companies which goes from 0 to 1 phase, founder, is a very, very sales heavy person, right? Who can sell well. So first you try to sell that vision and get people aligned. And then you have to ensure how does that vision percolate to each and every team, right? And one test of which I have seen founders practicing is going to junior levels and asking what are you solving for this quarter, which sort of is an acid test to understand whether the vision has been percolated across or not. That is when touching upon OKR is a great way. I think Sandy can talk about it. Flipkart uses it very extensively. OKR is a great way where, once the company objectives and key results are laid down, then you take those OKRs and how each and every team, takes that OKR and aligns their, so OKR is at first company level and then percolates to every team. And every team comes up with objectives and measurable key results. And once you have this in place, then, how do you break down into execution? Then you have come up with, 10 different things. And you prioritize in terms of what will help in sort of achieving those OKRs. And because it's measurable, right, at the end of every quarter, you sort of, see, where did you ended up. And it's always good to have an aggressive plan. And it's okay to not meet, but having not an aggressive plan, is not right. Yeah.
Pradeep, Sandy, I'll come to you subsequently, right? So, but then Pradeep, you've actually had, basically you've been part of companies which are at different stages of maturity, right? So probably Swiggy is a very far mature, Swansea are probably at a slightly lesser maturity as an organization per se, right? So do you see any commonality in terms of practices or even implementation or challenges that you see in terms of, in terms of different companies actually at different maturity cycles, right? So what are your views on that?
Sure. I think one commonality, everybody is trying to figure out what works for them, honestly. So I have been lucky enough to see implementation of various tools, including OKRs. So at Zeta, we used to use it extensively. Bhavan is a big fan of it. And at Swiggy, we do slightly different planning. I'll tell you, what it does is, OKR is a superb tool if the org is trained well to use it, right? And the biggest challenge that you face...
Not everything should be an OKR.
Yeah, that is true. And the biggest challenge in any planning cycle, these are all the tools at the end of the day, right? I mean, it's how well is the vision percolating to the last person, like Jitesh said, right? And what I've seen has worked, particularly at Zeta, and we used to do it a lot, that planning was not limited to few folks. And the answer of doing, what are we doing and whys are given to everybody pretty well. Because we're humans, right? Unless you give me an answer, I wouldn't be aligned to anything, honestly. I mean, if you say, let's say I want to build the best software for this audience so that they can look at and then figure out who is speaking, what are they speaking about, etc., right? It gives me some direction, but why am I doing is very important, right? And I have particularly seen in tech and in startups, product and tech, because they work so fast, right? You don't have any breathing space at the end of the day, right? And planning usually is an activity which takes weeks, right? So, and it's not that the org stops while you're planning. They're still working, everybody's still working, right? Now in that process, while you're delivering, and then you're also planning what should be delivered in next 6 months to 12 months or 9 months or whatever, right? That's a different mindset. So I think that's the biggest challenge, that how do you keep delivering and how do you prepare everybody for what is going to come next, right? So I think that's where, as I said, transparency is the biggest key. We used to have town halls, a lot of town halls during the planning sessions. Everybody used to participate, everybody used to ask questions. So if you have a culture of allowing people to ask questions to someone who is leading the planning discussions, I think the alignment comes faster. At the end of the day, these are tools. So OKR, I'll speak about it. Why I said you should know this tool, because OKR gives you what are you going to do, right? What you felt is the why part of it, why are we doing it, why are we not doing something else, it doesn't cover that, right? Sometimes these answers are very important to people, right? For example, I might be working on a product, let's say Unicard, right? And the regulation came. Now Jitesh comes to me and says, Pradeep, it's not going to work, we are changing it, we are picking another product, right? I worked on it for 6 months. Right? Now I have to figure out why am I moving to another product. Now OKR may say, okay, fine, Pradeep, work on this product number 2. Right? So what we do at Swiggy, we create a detailed annual plan. It starts with Harsha, the business, all the business teams sit and they decide what are we doing in next 6 months to 12 months, right? The alignment happens on that. And what will we do to achieve those objectives is left to the teams anyways. So the discussions are not on initiatives, the discussions are what are we doing. So it's more texty than okay, what we do here, but it seems to work for Swiggy.
And certainly because you've also been in analytics and probably you're more of an analytics guy as well, right? So, and then subsequently doing a lot of product as well. So, what do you think are the ways that probably organizations or should actually be doing to kind of address these challenges? And what would be the right best practices in your mind?
Right, again, OKRs, like Pradeep and Jitesh have said, right, these are excellent tools for people who really have figured out how stuff works. And one challenge that I see with OKRs, right, is that the contribution that the team in entirety has to the overall OKRs or the Uber OKRs of the company is extremely critical, right? So what happens, so one of the things why people join startups is to make sure that they're able to dream along with the founders in the direction that of the vision that the founders have painted, but they're able to dream and build something themselves, right? There is that pace in which you are developing something, but there is a lot of contribution and there's a lot of happiness, but that goes to them at the end of the day when they are just about to hit the bed, right? So that you have you know that your day has progressed well, right? Because you're able to contribute to the direction of the company, right? So the thing that gets left out a lot of times in OKRs is probably that how effectively is the lowest person or the smallest person in the team equally able to contribute to your OKRs, right? So if that is getting percolated while the top-down strategy and the bottom-up, right, how do they meet effectively is what is one of the key things that I've seen missing in a lot of companies that try to adopt OKRs, right? Flipkart has been on that journey and continues to be on that journey, right? So again, just some trivia again, while Google has made it extremely famous, it actually started with Intel, right? But the point that there was a lot of time when the OKRs as a concept got introduced to them getting adopted by industry, there was a lot of lag because a lot of companies struggled in doing it. right? So a bunch of challenges like this that come up. Yeah.
Just to add to this, what is the downside of not everyone understanding, right? What the vision is. The downside is that your team will become transactional. Now, what does that mean? That you'll ask them to do A to B, they'll do A to B. So there's no value add, right? How will that person grow if he keeps doing A to B, right? So once people are aligned with the vision, right, the kind of magic you see, I've seen that in a lot of places where, they just grow out of their skin, right? So that's the upside of when everyone understands the vision and what we are doing really, really well.
Great. So what we'll do is we'll basically come back to the panel. We'll go to the audience if they have any questions for the panelists, right? So we'll just open it out to the audience now. And then we'll come back for our subsequent. So open to the audience if you have any questions to the panelists. So I see a hand there. Yes.
Hello. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, this question is mainly for all of you who are leading the product teams. It's one of the challenges, especially in the area of 0 to 1, 1 to 10 organizations. How do you balance the tech debt, which is also very essential, as a mix of the feature and aligning with the product and business goals?
Yeah, so I'm the tech guy here, and these are the product guys. But I have my point of view, but I'd like to hear the product first, and probably I'll just add.
I wanted to hear from the product side of things, right? How do you see it?
Are you a tech guy?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So, see, just like, whenever you make a product roadmap, it's a very debated discussion. And why it's a debated discussion? Because, okay, why is product important? Because product gives you that non-linear growth, right? So having some items in the roadmap and not having some, you need to have a, data bag, consumer research bag. You need to have a very strong conviction in terms of what you are doing and why is that important. So similarly, tech debt plays the same role. But a lot of times what happens is, and it could be because engineering as a function, right? I mean, as a personality, are not very outspoken, right? So what happens is so articulation sometimes becomes very, very important. How do you articulate it that if we don't do this, then what's going to happen? And I have grown. Earlier, I had a vision that as to why this is important, but I have seen things breaking if we don't solve for it at the right time. That's when you realize that why something needs to be solved for. So that's why that articulation is very important in terms of if we don't do this, then what happens? And I think majority people are rational. And over a period of time, you align and you agree that this is something which has to be solved for. And if you don't do this, then we lose speed in the long run, or things break in the long run. You go slow in the long run. So I've started appreciating a lot, over my career in product management, that tech debt plays a critical role and it needs to be solved for at the right point in time.
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at it, right? So great point Jitesh made about basically, but then essentially it is also about, let's say for example, if your organization is tech driven in nature, right? Usually product gets steamrolled, right? So saying that, okay, engineers will, or engineering leaders will say that, okay, this has to be done, this has to be done, that's it, right? Unfortunately, what actually happens is that there is no alignment between product and tech, largely because these activities are very black boxed in nature. Like say from the perspective of engineering leaders don't necessarily give a visibility in terms of, or at least align it to some metrics or adjacency metrics. To give an example, so I'm from that PHP era, so I'll just take an example of that. Let's say for example, we built a service, like an authentication service, and that was built on PHP like 15 years ago, right? Now, of course, technology has moved ahead, far ahead, and then essentially there are a lot more new technologies. We can probably solve that problem even a better fashion. Now, if I am an engineering leader and I go into a strategy discussion and say that, okay, this is a very legacy tech, and this system is breaking all the time, and this is a tech debt, so we want to overhaul it, right? So in that sense, that is a very black box in nature, right? So it's not aligning to any of the other matrices or any adjacent matrices which actually align to the main matrices, right? But if in engineering, if I were to kind of articulate it in a way saying that as of today, this authentication service has a 5% error rate. And that 5% error rate means that essentially X percentage of users are unable to sign up. Which is so that is an adjacency metric which basically is tied up to your overall, let's say, transactional metric in the commerce world, right? So then essentially that's a lot more palatable. There's a lot more palatable discussion because then essentially we have a common denominator to discuss about, right? So like everyone understands, okay, what is going to be the impact of the signups going down or the transactions not actually being at the same level or conversion rate being at the same level, right? So from the engineering perspective, if we were actually being, if we are able to define a lot more common denominator level metric and we discuss on that, I think it becomes a lot more easier discussion to have because then you're just discussing on metrics and the cost associated to it and the benefit of it.
Just to add to it, I feel product is the reason why tech debt keeps piling up. Right? Engineering comes and says that to build this, they'll take 2 months. I said I need it in 15 days. You know, that's how tech debt keeps on piling up. And if you don't solve for it at the right point in time, then over a period of time, I've seen things slowing down.
I'll just try to add something. I think great points. But it's important to categorize tech debt. It's a big word, right? For an example, if I want to refactor the product, let's say I built a product for a specific scenario. I wanted to get, it's a B2B product, let's assume. It happens a lot in B2B products. For first 100 customers, I built my product. And I hand stitched it. And I know beyond that it won't go. Okay, up to 200 customers will go, beyond that it won't go, right? Then ideally, this tech debt to refactor the product so I can go to the 1000th customer should be in product backlog. It should not be called tech debt, honestly, right? And at the end of it, all of us are engineers. A lot of times we want to build something great which may not be needed, honestly, right? So if my demand is a 2 BHK and you want to build this Taj with 36 rooms, it's not a bad thing to do, but we are not there, honestly. Probably I'll never prioritize that, right? So if you categorize it well, and of course, I mean, I won't go into details of, what percentage of bandwidth should go in eating into the tech debt, etc. But if your product team and you communicate well, or engineering team communicates well, and they categorize it well, and it doesn't become a huge thing and huge project, I think it's fairly easy problem to solve. I mean, that's my experience, but yeah, it's doable, let me say that.
Sorry, this is one of those beautiful questions where everybody wants to pull a mic and answer, I guess. So again, right, I think 2 things only that it is all down to, right, is that you build for an MVP, right? Like you don't build Taj Mahal because you want to iterate and you are not sure that of the 10 bets that you're taking, what bet will fly. Which is why you have to build a viable product that will service a few customers, figure out there is a business in this, and then scale, right? The challenge that I see is that with tech debt is that, in fact, not just tech debt, right? There is product debt, there is actually business debt as well, right? The moment you roll out business and you figure out that there are some corners that you are cutting, and I encourage cutting corners for tenacity and speed, right? So because otherwise you'll never hit the light of the day to figure out whether it's an experiment that you want to bet on for the future, right? So coming back, the reason I think tech debt, a lot of friction between product, business and tech teams happen on tech debt is because going back to the objective OKR philosophy, right? Objectives and key results, right? So the objective is understood, right? There is no metric, there is no tangible benefit that is clearly articulated by a lot of teams, right? So hence, this is one thing that we did at Flipkart, right? And Flipkart, we were working big billion day to big billion day, right? Which means that we build technology for a big billion day. After that, we solve for our tech debt. So one of the things that the CTO said when we said we will take a lot of time to clear our tech debt, right? And the way he sold it is that we will be able to scale this for 10x users, right? And we will be able to make sure that whatever glitches we found on the D-Day at 12 o'clock in the night are not going to be there for the future, right? So these are some of these clear messaging that is missing, clear metric, clear outcome that is missing, which tends to actually create this friction, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any more?
Ask to the product guy is you know, how do you learn whether a product is working or not? What are the matrices? Can you share some insights on how do you learn that?
So art product, you know what metric are you chasing, right? So again, I can again categorize into 0 to 1. 0 to 1, it's all about finding the PMF, product market fit. Now, product market fit, you need to define like if you achieve to these many customers at this cost and the retention is this much, you have achieved a product market fit, right? So for a 0 to 1, it's about attaining that product market fit, which is the metric you're chasing for. When you go 1 to 10, you know, every function will have a different metric. And, you know, and especially in 1 to 10, metric plays a more critical role where, you know, you try to measure majority of the things and, you know, your roadmap is largely backed by, you know, what data says, what customers are saying, and things like that, right? So in 1 to 10, before even like you start writing the items, you know what is the metric you're chasing. For example, it's growth you are chasing, right? So you have to improve your conversions by X%. Okay, these are the 4 things you're going to do to drive your conversions by X%, right? So in 1 to 10 phase, it's always you know, metric driven. First you start with metric and then you break it down into what will help you to achieve that metric. So,
right? And you measure it against that. A lot of times I know I've seen a lot of folks building products without any objectives. So if you can't measure success of the product, there are high chances you didn't plan for the product well. So I think it starts from the planning that we spoke about, right? You start from a specific business goal, you build products under that, and if that business goal is being hit through product goals, I think you will say that your product is working. At the end of the day, if you get food from Swiggy, there are hundreds of products that are built. Swiggy is not one product at the end of the day. There is a delivery agent who uses Yulu, picks food. All of these are small products that are being used by multiple users, right? So they're doing their own objectives well to achieve the large business objective of you getting food from the restaurant that you're looking for. And yeah, that metrics is one way to look at it, whether it's working fine or not.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to that, we can also have, it's not only inward-looking metrics, right? It can also be qualitative metrics. Say, for example, after a product is launched, you can always do a qualitative analysis, talking to customers, getting their feedback as well. So that can be a great point of view of basically as to whether your product is working or not as well. Okay, any more?
If we are getting the sales, means we say that the product is working. So is the only thing that you will identify that the product is working good?
Yeah, I think sales, in fact, he said product market fit retention, right, which is the same customer coming back and coming back again and again, right? If at all, maybe another additional metric that you would look at is the cost of acquiring a customer, right? Has it gone down, right? So that's the only way to, that is one of the ways to measure whether you're doing well. So for some time you can actually burn money to get sales. In fact, I would not say that sales is actually the way to figure out whether a product is working well or not.
However, a counter argument to that is that probably in the gentleman's example of basically being an automobile marketplace, right? It's not every time that, okay, you buy a car or you buy a bike, you'll come and do a retention or a repeat. So in that sense, probably it would be sales. I think the question is from that perspective. So any viewpoints?
Yeah, so it depends from company to company. Like, so I've been part of 𝗕𝗲𝗄, right, where repeats are not there. So in businesses where repeats are there, like for example, Flipkart, Swiggy, where repeats are there, retention plays a very critical role. You can burn money to acquire customers. And at the end of the day, you need to have a vision to have a positive P&L, right? That is very important. But in companies like travel, when, you know, conversion is important, right? So there probably, you know, initial matrix is like how, because that repeats are very less in that industry. So in that case, sales plays a critical role, and but at what cost? And at the end of the day, is your P&L sort of, how is your P&L looking, right? So that's how I'll put it across.
Yeah, I mean, sales, I think, can't be the only in example of automobile, right? I mean, I can sell 1,000 scooters, and if they don't work after that, right, I don't think your product is successful. probably you bought those users. So the experience of using the product and the problem that you're solving is very important. Because if you don't do it, you don't have a business. You can probably make sales for once, but the word goes out at the end of the day, right? People are buying your product, not your company at the end of it. So yeah, I mean, making just sales, it is a good way to look at it. Of course, people won't buy your product if it's not good, but they have to be retained. They have to use the product as well. So experience becomes a huge key in today's world, right? There are umpteen products available. I mean, I don't think there is any differentiation left in a lot of products.
But there is a scenario where the customer or the consumer is bound to use any service, any product, because they don't have the choice. So in that case, what happens? You get the company gets the repeat sale, and but the consumer is not satisfied. Like let's take the example of Ola and Uber. If I'm not satisfied with both, but I need to travel one place to another, I have to go for Ola or Uber. But I'm not actually happy. So in that scenario, and let it be the case of Swiggy and Zomato also. So in that case, what do you say?
I would say it's a matter of time, right? If the customers are not happy, then you're building a company for 5 years or the next 50 years. That is the question. If the ultimately consumers are not happy, someone else is going to pick up that thread and sort of solve for it. So you're right in saying that sometimes the service deteriorates, but again, are you building a company for the next 5 years or 50 years? And if there's a gap which exists, which is not serviced by these two companies, or for that matter any company, then it's just a matter of time when someone will come and sort of sweep in that space.
To Swiggy and Zomato, duopoly market is tough from a company's perspective, right? From a user's perspective, I feel if I have to order food, there are only 2 players available in the market, right? It also depends what kind of product it is. Probably replicating Uber may not be so easy because it requires a lot of cars on the road, right? But Swiggy and Zomato can't just sit in their rooms and then say the third guy can't come. If they're gonna deteriorate their service so horribly, and I'm sure both the companies are working really, really hard to ensure that the customer experiences have gone beyond wherever they can. So in cases where you have lesser options, I think it's a bigger challenge for the companies, and the experience has to go high. Because the friction to get into this market by some other player is relatively lesser. Right?
Case in point, Snapdeal. Like,
so
it was where it was like 2013, and where is it now?
So don't you think that the company is working towards that the consumer become addict to their product or the service? Is it the direction the companies are working for that one? For the longer run?
Most of us, yes. Right. So again, right, as long, unless you are like Indian Railways, right, you cannot afford to sit and make sure that you can get a consistent revenue without improving experience, right? So the barrier of entry has to be extremely high for you to be not bothered about experience, right? So again, to the longer term, lower retention possibility kind of businesses, NPS is a great way, right? How many times do people refer? How many times do, like Pradeep was talking about, word of mouth keeps spreading? How many times do you have positive feedback that is coming up, right? How low are you spending on marketing to acquire a customer? All of these tie to each other to understand, to make sure that a product is working really well.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm satisfied now.
Great question, thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay. So so we'll come back to the panel again. Hopefully we have been able to shed some light and some value to the audience as well with respect to the discussion point about, coming back to the discussion point about alignment, right? About strategy with business goals, business strategy, and so on. So we'll probably end with probably 2 words of advice from each of you in terms of basically alignment. And then we're probably just shooting time. We just crossed 2 minutes, but we'll take a couple of minutes over here. Any words of advice from each of you in terms of the best way to kind of align product strategy with business goals? We talked about tech a lot, but probably with business. Yes. Sandilya can start.
Yeah. Again, the first thing that struck me is live and let live, right? Which is that, by which I mean, make sure that you have a lot of other voices also that are contributing to to building what you want to build, right? In a lot of cases, right, we're trying to build a product company, and it is not that product alone defines the vision or the roadmap for what needs to happen. So make sure, as a product manager, the advice that I would give to other product managers is that, you know, you continue to take expertise from other functions and make sure that you're able to take their inputs into the team, right? Unfortunately, I don't have a second one. Yeah.
All right. So if you are the one who plans in your organization, right, be as thorough as you can be. But if you are the one who is not planning, be as curious as you can be. I think these are the only things I'll say.
Wow, I'll kind of probably take a screenshot of that and probably hang it somewhere. Yeah, Jitesh, yes.
So, see, so, you know, just to summarize, we said like what, especially the company's vision, how does it percolates? That is important. How do you communicate? That is important. How do you keep repeating? That is important. Whether you have forums like town halls or not, that is important. Well, but friction exists, and friction should exist for a healthy reason, because ultimately, you know, resources are being spent, right? So they should be spent for the right reasons. As long as the you know, and often it is seen that, especially, you know, product and business, where business would come and say, no, I need to solve for this, where product does not feel it needs to be solved for, right? Sometimes the problem is that business is coming up with a solution which can be solved better, right? Where product feels, no, if you take a step back, there's not. So rational discussions are always encouraged, because that ultimately helps you to bring the best, you know, in whatever you're solving for. So, so it should exist. That is one. So some kind of friction is good, actually. Yeah, once, and again, some things which, you know, I've carried on from Amazon, whether it's a one-way door or a two-way door, right? Two-way door, it's okay. Speed is more important. You just go ahead and execute. But for one-way door, right? One-way door means you cannot, once you take the decision, you cannot go back. So for one-way door, it needs to be debated a lot before, you know, and we need to ensure that everyone is convinced that we have taken the, you know, right move forward. So yeah, that's how I'll put it across.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pradeep, Sandilya. Thank you, Jitesh. And thank you to NetNext for arranging this panel. So I totally loved this conversation. I hope you did as well, as much, present your points of view. And I hope the audience were able to generate value out of it. Thank you. I think we'll call.